Like, you can be like a freaking supermodel, but if you feel like an insecure little turtle on the inside.
Girls can be so fucking wild when they're jealous or something.
She's so shady. She's out here partying with old men and doing drugs everywhere.
Until you have a healthy relationship with yourself, you cannot share that gift of love with other people. Like, how can you?
Throw yourself in it. Like, go for it. Like, be fearless. Like, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Tough love for myself and tough love for the other parties as well.
Yeah.
What came first, babe?
The chicken or the egg? Who knows?
Oh shit, like now I have to like go on like some Tinder for best friends.
Be your highest self with my LSD.
Hello everyone and welcome to my LSD dose. Welcome back to the podcast that explores how to be your highest self in sex, relationships, career, wellness, and so much more, you name it. Please hit the subscribe button, subscribe to thrive. Your support means everything to us. I'm your co-host, Stay here and stay tuned.
And I'm your co-host, Maria. Woohoo! So on our previous episode, we were talking about adulting. And it seems to me, and I noticed that personally within my own life, that a lot of the times in the process of adulting, a lot of our connections and friendships, of course, they naturally change, but sometimes they fully break down. So today we're going to be discussing the topic of toxic friendships, identifying them, and how to gracefully bow out of these kinds of friendships. So let's go. Hit me.
So I totally agree with you. I mean, life is all about ebbs and flows, right? So we're always constantly changing. And I think that's the one, constant in life is that everything is always changing, whether you like it or not. And so the sooner you accept that, the easier life will be. But of course, the downside is that, sometimes you do tend to outgrow people and sometimes you attract people that are more aligned to you. So I know that, Maria, you've had some, recent experiences. I mean, I'm sure we all have had them, but I know that yours are very fresh.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate when you say that. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to it and have experienced this type of situation in our lives where friendships do either outgrow each other or, some kind of a dramatic breakup happens. And honestly, it's so not just about relationships between, like, in romantic type of sense, but I feel like friendships breaking down personally hurts a lot more. Not like in the immediate impact, but in the impact that it has on your life as a whole. Because I feel like we rely on those friendships, on those connections, on those specific relationships to be there for us when things are good, when things are bad, to just always be there. And when you come across a situation where that type of a relationship is on the edge of just completely crumbling down, it's a very, very hurtful and painful realization to come to. And in terms of my personal experience recently, unfortunately, that is where I'm at right now. I'm going to talk about the idea of a friend in need as a friend indeed. And I actually think it's a pile of bullshit. Of course, it is a fucking great when you have that support and that support system when things are not going very well in your life. And that tends to be the case quite a lot in life because it's always an up and down situation, a roller coaster, right? But what I have personally experienced is that two of my really good close friends, I would say potentially best friends in the world, have been very quick to be there for me when things were not going great for me, when I was heartbroken, when people betrayed me in my life, and they 100% were fully devoted to, my suffering and being there for me when I was suffering. And unfortunately, what happened past that point, when I did start healing, when I did start feeling better about myself and my situation, it kind of felt like that support was no longer existent. And instead that support was replaced by almost a sense of jealousy.
Yeah, or criticism. Maybe.
Or criticism. We're trying to pigeonhole me into the person that I kind of used to be when I was
Used to
pathetic and
be.
sad. It came to a point where my sadness and my heartbreak was starting to annoy them, because, it's all like fun and games when it just happened. So everybody wants to be like there and supportive.
Right.
And I find a lot of the times it's so inauthentic, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because it's almost like like the person who is there for you, a lot of the times they just kind of think to themselves, oh, thank God it's like not happening to me. And like a friend in need is a friend indeed when that friend actually sticks with you throughout the entirety of whatever process and whatever length of time you need to take to heal,
Yeah.
And then the healing happened, and then like the jealousy kind of like came out of nowhere, as it is unfortunately a lot of the times with female friendships. I ended up finding out that there was a lot of backstabbing and a lot of like bad mouthing me behind my back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
and so I wanted to ask you, do you think that this is kind of more prominent in female relationships to have this backstabbing scenarios and dynamics, and to have that kind of like full on jealousy towards each other instead of just being there in female solidarity, as we call it?
So I have actually heard from a lot of my guy friends. They tend to say that, a lot more conflict and falling out happens between female friendships more so than guys. I think I think definitely in the heat of the moment, especially if you're triggered, especially if you're emotional, God forbid hormonal, like women can get sometimes really, really catty and feisty. And like if you're coming from bad energy or you're in a dark place, because we've all had dark periods in life. Like I don't want to, I'm in a very specific place where I'm really conscious and self-aware now, and I take accountability for my energy, for my intention. But I wasn't always like that. Sometimes, when I was younger, I also had my toxic phases and periods, and of great insecurity. And I never did anything massively malicious, but I may have also come from, not the best energy. So I don't judge anybody for where they're at in their journey, but it can happen, I think, and it's just a reflection of where the person's at. I do though think that men and women tend to like output it differently. Like I think women might tend to be a little bit more vocal, a little bit more expressive, because we do connect through communication. I actually recently watched like an interview snippet of like Jane Fonda, and she was saying, how the beauty and like female friendships is like we look at each other, we communicate, we like look at each other's eyes, like that's like how we bond. Whereas men are like, hey, like let's go and like play
like the dudes,
game, like let's go game, or let's like go play soccer, and like yo bro, like let's just beat each other
me
up
and the boys, the entourage.
And then they like if they're not feeling it, they just beat each other up, and they're like, okay, cool, we're good now, we're good, fine. So it's a bit of a different bonding
less drama
experience.
for sure.
Less verbal drama, and less, I think, less sort of like strategic moves, maybe. But look, I can't speak for everybody. I think there's like certain people that will do certain things regardless of their gender.
For sure.
But I definitely think I've experienced it myself that, you got to be really careful with who you surround yourself in terms of support, because what you're saying is very interesting. It's like sometimes people can front like they're really supporting you, and they're really like, they're acting like they're supporting you, but in actuality, the energy and the intention behind it is coming from a lot of ego, is coming from a lot of attachment to certain concepts, or maybe even insecurity of how they feel, and they're projecting it onto you. Because you bring up jealousy, and jealousy is a big topic, of course, but we don't know really underneath the surface what's going on. It may land or deliver like it's jealousy, but maybe the person is just insecure or whatever, and they're like wanting to pigeonhole you because it makes them feel better about themselves. So surrounding yourself around people that really are actually have good intentions and want you to grow, I think is the important thing. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. Unfortunately, it's just sometimes kind of hard to be so aware, especially when it comes to older connections.
For sure.
Because you will forgive and forget a lot just due
Yes.
to potentially like some sort of a form of codependency at this point,
Mm-hmm.
because those people feel like almost like family to you, if not even, yeah,
Exactly.
full family.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a little bit less straightforward
Mm-hmm.
to identify those, signs of somebody being toxic in your life, because you'll just put a blind eye on it and you'll just
Yeah.
keep on going just for the sake of preserving this friendship that has been in your life for so long. And
I think
yeah,
that's a key point as well. Like it's very hard for long-term friendships to
mm,
understand how to manage them, because it is like family. It's like when you're friends with someone for like 15 years or 10 years or even 7 years, it's that mileage is sort of like, you kind of forgive a lot, or like let a lot of things slide, because
exactly.
it's like you've invested time, and it's just like, you're just trying to get on with it. But sometimes you just have to see things for what they are. And if somebody is another thing that I've seen you go through, which has been a little bit frustrating for myself, is that like, I personally, I mean, look, I'm a separate breed of person, but I have always tried to look at people, and see their pluses and feed feed their strengths. And so, it's very easy to look at a person and say, oh, you're doing this bad, and you look like this, and you're doing that, and it's really easy to critique them and then do whatever. But what is that going to do for the person, and what is that going to do for you? Like nothing. So it infuriates me when people try to consistently bring you back to somebody that you used to be like 7 years ago. On a molecular level, you're not the same person. And even if you went through a breakup, like I went through a traumatic breakup a couple of years ago, like, okay, but judging somebody in that space of time is also ridiculous, because they're
Fucked
completely,
up. And I
yeah,
feel like that's like actually a good like telltale. It's a good sign to kind of
totally.
look out for when you constantly have to keep on
Mm,
trying to make
mm,
something work instead of it
mm,
just flowing.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
just kind of came to a point where I was trying and I was reaching out and I just wanted to have the right conversations, and but instead of that being reciprocated in like a nice giving manner where it's a give and take relationship,
Mm-hmm.
it felt like that energy was blocked and that energy was just put down into like, or reverted back into the energy of the past. And
Right.
like it's so easy to excuse this type of behavior towards your
Yeah.
friend, just put it down to, oh, but like she's crazy and she's
Right.
fucking annoying and
Right.
like like down to like even slut shaming. And that is what I
Right.
found out recently, that I was like indirectly slut shamed by my best fucking friend in the world. And
Right.
that to me is so hurtful, honestly, like to the point where until this day, like it still like kind of like almost brings like tears to my eyes, because I
Mm.
never ever in my life would have expected to have been like something so pathetic as being slut shamed by
Right.
somebody who I trusted. I entrusted like my like basically like my life with, like somebody who
Mm.
knows my family, who has been to like every family function, my
Mm.
sister's wedding, my mother's like
Mm.
jubilee birthdays, and that's just quite recently. And it's
Yeah.
like, how dare you even go there? Like,
Mm.
considering what you and
So
I have shared.
yeah, so this is an interesting point, because I've
Mm-hmm.
experienced it personally in my life as well. I had a
Mm-hmm.
big blowout with a really close friend of mine last year, the beginning of
Yeah.
last year, and we're all good now. It was like we didn't fight for like 15 years. It was like our first fight we ever had. But the thing is, there was a lot of tension building up towards it, and I think it's kind of relates to your situation
Yeah.
too, because this was a friend of yours for many years, and you guys went through so many things
Yeah.
together, that I think, even on like in respects to the other side, because everybody has their side of the story,
Of
but in
course.
respects to the other side and everybody involved, like, you do go through so much, and maybe the person can hold on to so many
Mm,
moments and resentments, perhaps in some regards,
yeah.
to like situations that happen in different chapters of that relationship
Mm,
that was swept under the rug. And so over time that like can get piled on. And if there isn't that sort of communication and release and, you know, let go and forgiveness and sort of that whole like building between each other and just honesty and truth, I feel that that's when these things can happen because the person is sort of holding on to the past and they haven't let go and they're measuring you by who you are now, by all those moments that happened, you know, God knows when, and it's sort of justifying them to be a certain way towards you in a negative manner. And I
Yeah.
think like, you know, like I say, I had this similar experience and it blew up, which blew up into a fight because I was holding resentment. She was like a type of way and we there was accountability not taken. But then when it kind of blew up and then we were like, okay, let's face the music. And then we had
Yeah.
a conversation. So, you know, sometimes you can realign and sometimes you can't. And that's, I think, where you have to uh, make a decision, not so much on what conversation you even have, but like, how do you approach the situation? If you're coming from a place of growth and you're like, oh, I want to grow, are you going to grow with me?
With me. Yeah.
And the person is like, hey, I'm cool with you growing, but I don't want to grow like that. Then,
Hmm.
okay, then you're not aligned anymore. And I think that's
Yeah.
how you can see respectfully, you can be like, okay, like I don't want any bad energy, but if we don't approach life or have the same, you know, vision of how to do it, then let's say our piece and move on. And perhaps in the future, when it's better aligned, we can come back together. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll just attract different people. But I think like that's also how to go about it, like in a more detached way, because you mentioned
Yeah.
hurt and you mentioned pain, and it
Yeah.
can be really, those relationships can be really codependent. And so, how does one feel the courage and strength to up and out when they're codependent, right? Because they might not
Yeah.
have that many friendships, or they might be afraid of making new friendships, or they may not have a good situation going on.
Like
Yeah.
consciously like making new like best girlfriends is
Mm,
such an interesting and weird concept. I feel like to
mm,
many people out there, it's like, oh
mm.
shit, like now I have to like what like go on like some Tinder for best friends. You
But
know
you do,
what I
you kind of have to pursue people and you have to like pursue them and just be like, let's be friends.
That's what like Jane
Let's
Fonda
explore.
said,
That's
right?
what she
Like I
said. Yeah,
remember
that's what she said.
she's like, I pursue women, I pursue them
100%.
until they become my best friend.
Yes, exactly. Well,
A
that's what
chick
you,
girl, that might
that's
be
what
me
you
very
need.
soon.
No, but yeah, I think handling it in the right way and maybe just, you know, being compassionate, like you can be hurt and upset, but also just I think detachment like is the secret to life. If you can just be
Yes,
detached,
yes.
is a secret sauce because a lot of people confuse detachment with disconnection, but what they don't
Mm,
realize is if you are detached, you can be even more connected. If you're attached, then you're coming from codependency and you're coming from scarcity and you're coming from fear. And so you're
yeah.
holding on to all the things in the wrong way,
Mm.
right? But if you're coming from detachment, you're like, okay,
I completely agree with you because, you know, this situation has been going on for quite some time with me and my friendships.
yeah,
And like just now recently, I almost had to make the conscious decision to distance myself. And then I felt like I was in this limbo
guilty as well.
because
You
I
also
felt
felt
guilty.
guilty. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt guilty, and guilt is such a horrible feeling that like eats you
Mm,
up from within, and
mm,
it's just the worst, truly, honestly.
yeah.
And what you're talking about, detachment, is like, you know, I decided consciously not to make it into a blowout
Yeah.
and not to bring it up into like some kind of like a dramatic text conversation,
Because there's no
because you know
need.
yeah, and we're all going through all like specific situations right now,
Sure.
and so I decided to just leave it
Yeah.
for the time being. And because of the time that has passed from then and now, I'm starting to get into a frame of mind where I definitely feel more detached and
Mm,
just kind of coming to a place where it's a nicer feeling, even though I'm not happy about this
of course.
bullshit at all. I didn't want to be in this situation in the first place,
Of course.
but you have to set boundaries
Yeah.
for yourself.
Totally.
And that's like super important in just like growing and again adulting, setting those boundaries when something hurts you, when something does not feel aligned with your higher self, as we call
Yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
is making you feel shit about yourself, especially something that is done by a person who you completely trust it, you have to then take a step back and reassess,
Yeah,
the
100%.
relationship.
Because
Yeah.
also that's a segue to, a relationship with yourself. Nobody talks about
Yeah.
that either. It's like, oh, who is this person? Like, what do I do with this? Like, who am I, and how do I treat myself? How do I nurture myself? How do I love myself? And then you establish a healthy sort of ecosystem within yourself, and then you can share with other people's
For
ecosystems. But
sure.
the we had to kind of learn it backwards, like many people do. Like, you start having relationships with other people, and then you start learning about yourself, effectively. But in what you're describing right now is super important, because it's like, how can I be understanding and loving and do the right thing for the person, but also make healthy choices for
For
myself,
myself.
so I
Yeah.
feel empowered and I feel safe. And I think feeling safe in relationships, whichever kind they are, whether it's parents, friends, situationships, relationships, like, I think that's important. That's like the most important thing, as long as you feel safe. So, so yeah, it's, I mean, kudos to you for like looking at all those things and reassessing and taking a moment and not exploding. I think
Tough,
that's,
tough shit, man.
yeah, I think that's another tip. I think,
Also,
that,
that's tough love as well, That's
yeah,
tough
yeah,
love for myself and tough love for the other parties as well.
yeah, for
Like,
sure.
I'm sorry, like, I need to reassess my shit, and you could probably, maybe, hopefully can reassess your shit when it comes to the way that you,
And then maybe
deal
you can
with it.
grow, to a better place together at
Yeah.
a aligned
I mean, that
time.
would be the hopeful outcome, the best
Yeah.
outcome.
And if
Yeah.
not, then, God bless. Like, it was a great ride, and, we got,
Godspeed, yeah. Literally.
no problem. But for sure, yeah. So detachment, and I think that's another tip, is not reacting from ego, not jumping in and being like, even if you're upset and being like, yeah, I'm gonna just
Yeah,
being
yeah,
like, okay, let me like look at this picture and let me just sit with myself and see how I want to navigate this relationship. And is this a relationship that I want to include next to me? Is this for my highest good? Because
yeah.
most of the time they're not, you know.
Well, a lot of the times. Hopefully
Yeah,
not most of the times, but a lot of the times.
yeah.
But it's crazy that you mentioned, and I think it's a very, very strong and important point, is the relationship that you foster with yourself,
Mm,
what you harness from within.
mm,
Because literally this morning when I was working out, I was listening to a podcast with Mark Manson, and he
mm-hmm.
was literally talking about that exact same thing. And I know some individuals that, exactly who I'm thinking about,
What they do.
who
Oh,
love to jump from relationship to relationship,
yeah.
to make themselves feel better about themselves and to find that external validation from
Mm,
others, because they're almost allergic to just like sitting there and developing a relationship with themselves.
yeah.
And it's crazy, because it is so factually true and so
Mm-hmm.
important to just like drill into like my head, your head, everybody else's heads, that until you have a healthy relationship with yourself, you
For sure.
cannot share that gift of love with other people. Like, how can you if you
How can
don't
you?
have,
Yeah.
like, if I'm like selling, like, I don't know, eggs, and I don't have the eggs, what the fuck kind of eggs am I going to be selling?
Or you don't got the chickens, you can't sell that.
But actually,
Right.
what came first, babe, the
The
chicken or
chicken
the
or the
egg?
egg? Who knows?
Speaking of chicken or egg, there is actually that concept with that love, self-love, and
Yeah.
love of the outside
Yeah.
party, because a lot of the times, in order for us to kind of be triggered and be inspired and almost be in desperation of seeking that love from within, we have to go through
Yes.
like traumatic
Yeah.
experiences within relationship with others,
Absolutely. But that is
Yeah.
going through quote unquote community. Like, you can read as many books as you like and watch as many things in isolation and do as much therapy in isolation. But you're
Yeah.
only really going to hit the deep stuff when you have that feedback, that pushback, when you're actually interacting with people and having relationships. And it's scary, and a lot of people avoid it. But, I guess adulting, as us adulting, would part of the biggest advice would be no, just throw yourself in it, like go for it, like be fearless, like feel the fear and do it anyway, because that way
Yeah.
you're gonna grow faster, you're gonna evolve faster. Like I did that, so then I'm now surrounded by friends that I genuinely truly trust, and sure
Mm.
we might have some friction and stuff, but I don't gotta worry about these. I don't need to worry about these girls like not, not supporting me, or how they think about me or saying anything bad, because like I understand the difference in how I feel energetically, but I had to learn that through community. I couldn't, it's impossible to look at that through a book or
Yeah. IRL, right?
yes, yes.
You got to
But
learn from your own mistakes and not through the mistakes of
but I
others.
mean,
As such.
damn, girls, going back to the beginning of our convo, girls
Yeah, yeah, of course.
can be really freaking wild. Like I've experienced some
Girls gone
crazy.
wild,
No,
baby.
but really, I've experienced, because I've never been a malicious type, because I always like have a karma
Mm.
thing. I think like whatever energy you put out, it's gonna come back. Even when I've like broken up with like shady exes, I've never been the one to. I was like, higher power, you just deal with it. And I never been the one to like, do a revenge thing. I just never thought it was like, I didn't want that energy boomeranging back. And I have this like one wild story. I remember I was like in my most, questionably, my most sober and focused time of my entire life. It was when I was living in London, and I was literally not going out. I was just focusing on my first business at the time. I just finished my master's degree. I was super quiet, super chill, eating healthy. And so I'm, going, I went out and I had like like one time, and I saw some friends, went home, whatever. And then a friend of my ex's, because we were good friends, and a friend of my ex's was like, "Oh, do you want to grab lunch?" And this and that. I'm like, "Sure."
Mhm.
And so we go and grab lunch, and I'm showing him like my business and like this and that, and we're just chatting away. And he's like, "Stay, are you doing okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing great." He's like,
Fuck.
well, some girls said a few things, and I was just, concerned, so I thought I'd check on you, and that's why I'm having lunch with you. And I was like, what? What do you mean? What did they say? And so these girls in like this sort of like social circle that I wasn't close with, these just two shady girls, they literally started going around and saying to my ex at the time and other people, they're like, "Oh, stay, she's so shady. She's out here partying up with older men and doing drugs everywhere." And the thing is, everywhere
Wow.
in London, like our circles, everybody knows me really well. They know, A, I don't do drugs because I have a heart condition,
Mm.
so I can't physically do drugs. Otherwise, I might die. And the other thing is like, not I, older men are great, and I'm open to like all like experiences in life, but I've always been one to, like my men more fresh, let's say, quote unquote.
We like the
So,
fresh meat, the
well,
fresh cuts.
especially at that time, that was like 5 years ago. I was like, what, 26, 25 or something. So like
Of course, yeah.
yeah. So it was the most shadiest thing. And they were like on a mission to tell everybody. So it's just crazy how sometimes, yeah, like they were not my close friends, but sometimes girls can be so fucking wild when they're jealous or something.
100%. Surely they are driven by like something, because that takes effort. It takes effort
Right?
to actually go start spreading rumors around someone,
It's crazy.
about someone.
It's
And
crazy.
so obviously there was a driving point, because you never actually did anything personally bad to them. You never kind of
No,
hooked up or slept with any of their boyfriends
no.
or anything like that. So the
I was
only
nothing but
driving force
nice.
that I could think of here is jealousy. Like
Yeah.
straight up, full on jealousy. Like here's this girl, stay. She's like partying, like living the good life. She's pretty, she's hot. And like people love hanging out with her, and like these like sad little girls like sitting there and getting like, like get a fucking life. Like you can be like a freaking supermodel, but if you feel
Mm,
like an insecure little turtle on the
true,
inside,
true,
it doesn't
true.
matter. What probably offended them the most is your energy and the way that you are and how you carry yourself in public.
Mm.
You could even be like 10 times like less hot, than you are, and still
Oh,
get
thanks,
the
girl.
jealous vibes and jealous looks. But it's true. And I think
Yeah.
that's like a big issue. It's like fucking go, and instead of like bad mouthing other people and pointing fingers at others, go and like think, why do I have the need to externalize my own
Mm,
like disdain, maybe potentially with
mm.
myself, onto others? you know?
I mean, it's obviously coming from a lot of trauma and wounds, and we have a
100%.
we have an amazing course for that. So if you're feeling a type of way, or you woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning, just hop on board and like take our course. We have a lot of
Yeah.
tools and techniques you can use to deal with trauma, limiting
Mhm.
beliefs, confidence,
Yeah.
discipline. We have it all. But I think maybe we should list a few points, like quick tips, what to do when
Go
one
for it.
finds like themselves in the situation. So I think going back to one of your point is not overreacting, sitting with yourself, reassessing and reflecting is step number one. Step number two, not to come from fear, attachment, and like insecurities, I guess you can say. The world is a big place. Whether you feel it or not, you're abundant. So sitting with yourself and having a look at how you're treating yourself in the situations you put yourself in, and then concluding decisions with what to do with those relationships is probably a good two-step process. And then number three, essentially looking at the person as a mirror and a reflection, and coming at it with compassion to yourself and love to yourself and love to them. No matter if they did something incredibly malicious or really bad from the ego, try not to lower yourself down to the level of ego and be like, okay, this person is hurting or is coming from trauma. Let me see like how I can approach a situation that is healthy for myself and healthy for the person. And if it's a line that we continue, great. If it's not, then I'm detached. But I know that I can make
Yeah.
connections that are healthy for me, and I can go and move on with with confidence and at peace that I did the best I could do, and I didn't come at it
Yes,
and with matching that
exactly.
same ego energy.
It's great. And for sure, just like, please remember your boundaries, and try to make the choices that are the healthiest for you, regardless of whatever kind of attachments, like you said, you may feel towards other people, and a sense of responsibility, because honestly, truly, you're only responsible to yourself. Thank you for listening to us today. Thank you for being on this journey with us. And please hit the button below and subscribe to Thrive. Your support means everything. We love you guys. Yes. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Ciao.
Bye. Bye. Bye.